Hello, welcome to Philosophy Roulette number 122. That is Philosophy Roulette 122, where we get philosophy off the internet and read and review it live for the viewing pleasure. Now, I usually just grab something off front page of Phil Papers or whatever's new, but got a request here on Philosophy Roulette 23, which seems like a million years ago, March 21st. I'm 100 ahead of this one now, and that was I guess 2 months ago about. Yeah, well, a month and a half maybe. So got a little comment. Read another article by Rasmussen. He is a brilliant thinker. So we've got a Rasmussen fan here. So let's go take a look at what we've got. If there's anything else by Rasmussen we can grab. So, Joshua Rasmussen. Alright, book. Is God the best explanation of thought? A dialogue. Let's see. Oh, that looks like a book. 2. Let's see. Springer Verlag. Chapters. Yep. Okay. Yeah. These are these books. Yeah. Let's see if we get down to papers. Published articles. PPR. All right. Let's see how long that is. PPR tends to do longer things. This is what I did. How to build a thought. Philosophical explorations, problems with plurals, randomness-based theory-based theodicy for evolutionary evils. That sounds like fun. Zygon. Okay, so let's see what's available. Oh, good. They're all on his website, but we're gonna have to see how the length is there. I don't want to be reading for 2 hours straight. That is difficult. Not available. Oh, it's a chapter or something. No. Well, let's just see if it's available on Scholar, because maybe it's because it's somebody else. They didn't let it go. No, not there. Yeah, it's a chapter, not a book. Let's see, and then this one is. Oh, this was the exciting one I was hoping for. Let's see. It's not like so much fun. Theodicy for evolutionary evils. I mean, it was 20 pages, so I probably would have defaulted away from that, but still. 15, very reasonable. I could do that one. This one's 17, so there we go. So we're doing a new puppet puzzle. Alrighty, so this was, which one was this? Okay, so a new puppet puzzle by Bailey and Rasmussen. Is that what I did before? Is this Bailey and Rasmussen? Yeah, so this is the same writing team we have here. And if you join me live, and I hope you do, you can, like, the chat usually is whatever happened before you got here isn't usually on the screen, so you can type !paper, and then this link will pop back up, and you can follow along if you so choose, if you are live. So. Alright, good to go. Hey, wow, the bitrate's looking good, because Twitch, the live streams were a little shaky for a while. Yeah, nice flat bitrate going out to the internet. Okay, so we've got a new puppet puzzle. What was this? Do I even have any idea what this is about? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay, well, I could have read the abstract, but I'm not going to. Okay, here we go. Introduction. We can always undermine the sense of our own autonomy by reflecting that the chain of explanation can be pursued till it leads outside of our lives. So writes Thomas Nagel. So, puppets for puppets. This article begins with a similar idea. But instead of reflecting on a chain leading without, we will focus on a chain leading within, all the way into our world's smallest parts. Okay, this is the problem of not action at distance, but action at a closeness, which is just as hard to solve. Because gravity is a spooky action at distance because something's far away and it pulls on us, but then we have no idea how anything actually happens when it's right next to each other either. So it's only the medium-sized stuff that we engage with in our world. Everything else is just very confusing. Okay, so let us begin with a rough and ready statement of the puzzle we have in mind. I and my world are made of very small parts. I haven't the faintest clue what's going on with those parts. Despite the fact that some of them dwell within my borders, they are beyond my ken, and I am not at all morally responsible for their activities. Yeah, are you responsible for the quantum physics within your fingertips? Maybe. And yet everything I do is a consequence of what they do. Well, this right here is, what do you mean by consequence? And, yeah. So everything I do is the consequence of things for which I am not at all responsible. It's hard to resist the conclusion, then, that I'm not responsible for anything I do after all. Well, this is very reductionist. If you're reducing everything to other stuff, you can reduce it to something outside of you or reduce it to something inside of you, but it's still reductionist. Okay. Much in the reasoning above has the feel of common sense. Well, I don't have your common sense. I've lost all my common sense. Yeah, basically. Yet that reasoning implies something that hardly anyone believes, namely that I am a mere puppet of various small elements of the material world, and so not responsible for my actions. Something must give. We devote this article to developing and evaluating this puppet puzzle. We will first offer a more careful statement of the conundrum in the form of a valid deduction from theses that one could find independently plausible. Then we will examine a promising solution that denies a bottom-up explanatory picture of composite objects. Alright, so this is the denies a bottom-up, so this is denying the reductionary picture of composites. We close by identifying the significant implications of denying the bottom-up picture. Our presentation invites an uneasy choice. 1. Abandon compositism, the view that we are composed of proper parts. No proper, this is not my hand, this is not a part of me. That's crazy. Or 2, deny that we are responsible agents. Or 3, live with the implications of top-down determination. There's always a fourth option. But we'll find out what they say 1, 2, and 3 are. The puppet puzzle stated. The puppet puzzle comprises 6 plausible but jointly inconsistent theses. 1. Atomic priority. If composition about human persons is true, then there are atoms whose behavior necessitates and explains my behavior. Okay, so we've got right here off the bat, we've got atomic priority. This is a kind of a reductionist thesis saying that the priority goes to the smaller thing, not the bigger thing. So we're reducing ourselves to something atomic. Compositism. Compositism about human persons is true, so we're made up of other things. Epistemic condition. I am not responsible for facts which I non-culpably know little to nothing. Okay. Ignorance. I non-culpably know little to nothing about the facts about those atoms whose behavior necessitates and explains my behavior. So, I also don't know anything about my neurons. Am I responsible for my neurons? Seems like there might be some middle point here where there's a cutoff, which would be interesting to talk about too. Connection, we've got downward causation, which is another issue. Anyway, I'll get back to that later. Connection, if the A facts, what's an A fact? If A facts necessarily explain the B facts, I'm not responsible for the A facts, and I'm not responsible for the A facts, then I am not responsible for the B facts. Okay, so this is supervenient in the sense of responsibility. Supervenient, if B supervenes on A, and A's necessitate the B's, and you're not responsible for what the B's supervene on, I'm also not responsible for the supervened thing. The supervener as opposed to the supervenee. Whatever. Responsible. I am not responsible for my behavior. We see that these 6 theses are inconsistent by the following deductions. A. Therefore, the atoms whose behavior necessitate and explains my behavior from atomic priority compositism. B. Therefore, I am not responsible for my behavior from epistemic condition, ignorance. C. Therefore, I'm not responsible for my behavior, and I am not responsible for my behavior, and I am responsible for my behavior. B and responsibility. So this, and then these things follow, and then you've got a contradiction about responsibility. Two notes. First, the puppet puzzle is in the first person. I invite you to consider each of these theses from your own perspective. We think you'll see that the puzzle generalizes. Second, as shown above, the 6 theses comprising the puppet puzzle are indeed inconsistent, and thus cannot be jointly true. One immediate consequence is that one shouldn't accept all 6 theses. At least one must be false. We do not present the above deduction, then, as an argument that is to be accepted. Quite the contrary, we are confident that it cannot be a sound argument, and that one of its constituents must be false. But which? This is at the heart of the matter and is the central topic of this article. There is, we'll argue, no easy and obvious solution. Each thesis has some initial plausibility, and rejecting any comes at a significant price. This is precisely what makes the puppet puzzle a puzzle. To show all this, we have a closer look at atomic priority, epistemic condition, ignorance, and connection. We will not comment further on responsibility and compositism, except to note that they are both widely considered extremely plausible. A great many philosophers maintain that we are morally responsible for what we do, at least some of the time, and that we are composed of proper parts. Yes, but what is it? I mean, I wonder what what do you exactly mean by composed here? Is there reductionist things built into composition, or is it just that you can break stuff up? It's like, well, I can break up lots of stuff. That doesn't matter. And this is the issue. The priority here is often important. Atomic priority expresses an orthodox view about human persons. The materialist formation of orthodoxy is familiar enough. Humans are built of wholly material parts, brains, bones, lungs, cells, and so on, and the activity of those parts, perhaps in concert with the activity of atoms elsewhere in the material world, jointly explain the activity of the whole person. We'll mostly focus on materialist versions of compositism, but we note that even non-materialist compositist union dualists, for example, may here face puzzles too. In a materialist framework, atomic priority falls out of the more general view that the activities of larger physical objects are explained and necessitated by the activities of smaller items. A rock is composed of atoms of various kinds, and the puzzle of the atoms both necessitate and explain the behavior of the rock as a whole. Applying this idea to people, we do what we do because of various material parts, of what various material parts do. Yeah, this is the reductionist thesis. We make no assumption about the kinds of things that, given compositism, compose us or our surroundings. They could be cells, strings, fields, or something else besides. Nor do we assume that there is a lowest level of decomposition. For ease of presentation, we'll talk of atoms. This is shorthand for items at a very low level of decomposition. A level lower than that of the chemist's molecules, let's say, where we completely overlap at least some of those items. We do not assume that such atoms completely overlap us. Some may lie far outside of borders, more on this in a moment. So understood that these of the puppet puzzle are compatible with the thesis of the puppet puzzle are compatible with the thesis that we are gunky creatures, that all of our parts have proper parts. Let us be more precise about necessitation and explanation. Necessitation, the X's behavior necessitates Y's behaviors, means this. For every truth F sub Y about Y's behavior, so as a fact about Y's behavior, there is a truth fact about X's behavior, such that necessarily, if F of X, then, well, F sub X, then F sub Y. So, for example, if the motion of a certain rock is necessitated by the motion of certain atoms, then truths about the motion of those atoms entails the truth about the motion of that rock. Regarding explanation, X's behavior explains Y's behavior means this. Y is doing what it does because X is doing what it does. We take ourselves to have a pre-philosophical understanding of the notion of because as it is used here. More generally, we seem to readily understand what people mean when they say such thing as the kitten meowed because its tail was pulled, or the boat is sinking because there are too many people in it, or it is true that snow is white because snow is white, or you are in pain because certain neurons in your brain are firing a certain way, and so on. We do not assume that the explanation in question is distinctively causal, nor do we assume that it is not. Further, we are not suggesting that the nature of explanation cannot be analyzed further. Indeed, much of recent work in metaphysics is devoted to better characterizing the nature of explanation. For our purpose, we require just one assumption about explanation, where X and Y are distinct. If X because Y, then it is not the case that Y because X. Explanation in the target sense is asymmetric. Okay. Another note of clarification. Yeah, it seems like some reviewers got to these authors like, come on, clarify, clarify, clarify. Atomic priority does not imply determinism. The thesis that the state of the world at any time with the laws of nature entails all subsequent states. Atomic priority is only concerned with necessitation of an explanation from parts to whole, not determinism from past to future. So atomic priority doesn't imply that the past together with the laws determine the future. The initial theses of the puppet puzzle threaten responsibility independently of any threat posed by determinism. We will return to this point below. Okay, that's interesting that this is a slightly different thing from determinism. It's in the same vein, though. Because, I mean, it's like a local causal chain as opposed to like a laws of nature one. This is just a local one based on pieces of the organism as opposed to the laws of nature. So it's a bit more localized, but it's similar stuff. For all atomic priority says, even if compositism is true, there could be other factors in addition to certain atoms' behavior that also explain and necessitate my behavior. Atomic priority does not entail that bottom-up explanations exclude other kind of explanations. It is consistent then with atomic priority that compositism is true, that all my behavior is necessitated and explained by certain atoms' behavior, and that any of the following are also true. My behavior is also necessitated by and explained by my various psychological states. B, my behavior is also necessitated and explained by various biochemical facts. C, my behavior is also necessitated and explained by various social facts. D, my behavior is necessitated and explained by facts about the world as a whole. Yeah, so this is sort of a little bit, I wouldn't go with fine-grained, it's a localized. You can sort of look at different ways of breaking up the world, not necessarily according to laws of nature, which would be facts about the world as a whole, but you can do it more locally according to different things, but similar stuff. Atomic priority, furthermore, is neutral on where the relevant atoms may lie, and in particular, whether they must all fall within my borders. This is as it should be. Why should it be anyway? Alright. That Serena is executing a serve is not just a matter of what's going on within Serena. It is also a matter of whether she is playing tennis, what the rules of tennis are, and so on. For all atomic priority says, some of those atoms whose behavior explains and necessitates Serena's behavior fall outside of her boundaries, overlapping, for example, with a ball and two rackets, an audience, and an opponent. What matters is that there are such atoms, and that at least some of them are her parts. The key claim atomic priority makes is not an individualistic one, according to which every case the whole is necessitated and explained by just its parts. Rather, it is a directional one, according to which there is always a necessitating explanation from small to big. Why are small things taken to be more important? I'm always a little bit worried about the smallness of things being important. Why does size matter? Smallness. Yeah. See, it's like explanation from small to big. But, you know, when you say it like that, and this is not anything against these authors, it's they're basically taking a pretty standard view. And I challenge someone other than finding me to be like, why don't people have a problem with smallness? Like, what is so important about being small? Try to get someone to answer that question. They're like, well, it's laws of nature. And then they start appealing to like other big things, but no, the smallness thing is a bit of an issue here. Alright, epistemic condition expresses one plausible and widely accepted necessary condition for being morally responsible. Responsibility requires some kind of control, but it also requires some kind of knowledge. Though epistemic condition on responsibility might outstrip those expressed here, it's plausible that they include at least some minimal knowledge of that for which one is responsible. Non-culpability is important. Consider reckless Frank, who culpably knows little or nothing about the dangers that beset young Dennis. Is Frank thereby not morally responsible for facts about the dangers Dennis faces? It doesn't seem so. Ignorance doesn't seem to excuse. But where one is non-culpably ignorant of some facts, such ignorance would seem to remove or mitigate moral responsibility. If Frank were to be innocent in his ignorance of those facts involving Dennis, then Frank wouldn't be morally responsible for them. Okay. We might wonder whether one could be responsible for unknown things that are involved in ordinary activity. For example, maybe you want to bake some bread, yet you do not know exactly how the dough rises or how the atoms in your fingers will move as you need. In this case, perhaps you could be responsible for the resulting bread, even when the microphysical processes are unknown. That is plausible. We find it significantly less plausible, however, that you are responsible for those unknown microphysical activities involved in baking. You are rather off the hook when it comes to the processes themselves, precisely because you are innocently ignorant of them. I mean, you get the willful, and ignorance is the problem. See politicians. Is Frank and there? Ignorance doesn't excuse if you're like culpably know little to nothing, but you're just trying to avoid it. Okay. One might insist, but the point these authors are making is fine. It's like, if you don't know, I mean, how are you responsible for like biochemical processes that have nothing to do with you? Like yeast causing bread to rise. I have no idea. I barely know what yeast is. One might insist here that knowing the intimate details of the microphysical world is not required for moral responsibility. We would agree. But this observation isn't at war with epistemic condition. For all epistemic condition says you are responsible for your behavior baking some bread, even if you know little to nothing about microphysical processes involving yeast, the development of gluten networks, and so on. To unseat epistemic condition, a rather stronger claim is required, that you are morally responsible for those microphysical processes themselves, even if you know little to nothing about them. And that stronger claim is, we think, significantly less convincing. What exactly is the epistemic condition? You have to, there's a question of exactly, how far epistemic stuff can be pushed. I mean, it's an old argument that if you know something, you're responsible for, like, the logical consequences of what you know. But of course, if like logical consequences can be like, you know lots of stuff and you have not done all the logic and all the propositions in your head, and therefore you actually, there's no way that you know like the logical consequences of all the things that you know, because you could probably figure out some interesting facts if you were to do this, but that's completely not plausible that you actually were able to do logical processing on all that stuff in your head. So there's some issues here with how far you can really push epistemic knowledge, like how far you can get how much knowledge you can get out of your previous knowledge, and again, if there's some things that are you are ignorant of, then you know some things but not like all of the other things. So it's hard to you have to be minimally knowledgeable for what you're responsible for, which is not the sub-processes, but maybe like the overall causal structure. Yeah. Okay, anywho. As we noted above, the moral responsibility requires both control and knowledge. It's hard enough to find the relevant control for microphysical items about which you innocently know little to nothing. There is no obvious steering wheel. But even if there is, it is even harder to find knowledge. There isn't even a rear view mirror to help you see what's behind everything you are doing. Yeah, see, this is, again, this sort of a metaphor here. This is the smallness. How can you even see what you did do, what you were doing? It's hard. We stress finally that commitment to principles like epistemic condition is commonplace and independent of considerations raised in this article. It would be surprising should it turn out that ordinary cases of agency making bread without knowledge of the details of some yeasty processes showed that these principles were false. Yeah, well, these sort of everyday things won't show it's false, but it may show that there are problems with it, that epistemic condition might be too strong if it implies that you need to know the microphysical processes. Okay. Ignorance has two components, a denial of knowledge and a claim of non-culpability. You probably don't know much about, say, carbon molecules among your smaller parts. You may know even less about the electrons that compose the items in your immediate vicinity. Sure, you know where they are, and you may know a bit about the powers they enjoy, but really the goings-on of the smaller parts of the material world rarely occupy your mind. We think this much is fine since you haven't violated any epistemic or moral duty in remaining ignorant. Your ignorance of such matters is non-culpable, but components of ignorance then appear quite plausible. It is instructive to note one dimension of comparative modesty that the puppet puzzle enjoys. Cover and Hawthorne present an argument similar to in spirit to ours, discussed further below. The argument requires that people don't have a choice about any of their microphysical details. The puppet puzzle requires nothing so strong. It doesn't even require that people aren't morally responsible for their microphysical details. Instead, our puzzle posits that people are non-culpably ignorant of their microphysical details. So even if, for example, if I enjoy free will over certain microphysical details, perhaps by freely moving my hands, the motion of which requires certain microphysical changes, I might nonetheless be ignorant of those details. Yeah, there's some issues in here of exactly how we're cashing this out that I think make a difference, again, with the epistemic condition above. Like, how far can you push knowledge, really? Connection is one of the formulations of so-called transfer principle. It says that non-responsible transfers across relations of some sort, in this case relations of necessitation and explanation. One strategy compatibilists use to resist transfer principles cannot succeed against connection. The point is worth developing at some length, for it will show that where other arguments falter, the elements of the puppet puzzle may yet succeed. John Martin Fisher has argued against the transfer principle like the following. Principles like the following. Okay, I just want to point out up here. Compatibilists. I think this is one of the big targets of this art, of people who think it responsibility and not determinism, but like whatever they called it above. Not the determinist thing, not the full-on determinism, but the necessitation this is the target, the compatibilists. I don't think these folks, I think that's where we're going here. So we'll see. Alright, so Fisher has argued against the transfer principle like the following themselves premises and arguments for incompatibilism about moral responsibility and determinism. Yeah, like this stuff here. Transfer. If no one is even partly morally responsible for the fact that P, and no one is even partly morally responsible for the fact that if P then Q, then no one is even partly morally responsible for the fact that Q. Here's one of Fisher's counterexamples to transfer. Green walks along the beach and, noting that there is a child drowning, dives into the water and rescues the child. Though Green has had a device implanted in his brain, the device does not play any role in Green's decision to save the child and his subsequent action. That is, the device monitors Green's brain activity but does not actually intervene in it. Let us suppose that this is because the scientists can see that Green is about to decide to save the child and to act accordingly. But let's also suppose that the scientists would have intervened to bring about a decision to save the child if Green had shown an inclination to decide to refrain from saving the child. That is, were Green inclined to decide on his own not to save the child, the scientists would ensure electronically that he decide to save the child and also that he act to carry out this decision. Decide. They decided, he didn't decide. Fisher notes, Green is not morally responsible for the fact that the scientists are ready to intervene, and he is not responsible for the fact that if they are so ready, he will save the child. But he does seem to be morally responsible for saving the child. So it seems the same Frankfurt-style cases that famously undid the principle of alternative possibilities also tell against transfer, and thus argument for the incompatibility of responsibility and determinism. Can Frankfurt-style cases also be used to unseat connection? No! In Frankfurt-style cases, a prior condition guarantees a target result without bringing about the result. The target result is necessitated but not explained by the prior condition. This is their odd charm. The target result occurs independently and not because of the presence of a prior condition. Green, for example, does not save the child because of the presence of the scientists. Green's good work is not explained by the presence of the scientists. But the presence of the scientists nonetheless guarantees that Green saves the child. An accessible counterexample to connection would be one in which certain facts, A facts, necessitate and explain certain facts, B facts, and in which 2, an agent is not responsible for the A facts but is responsible for the B facts. Frankfurt cases, by their very design, fail to exemplify condition 1. The A facts that scientists are present in Fisher's Green case, for example, may necessitate or suffice for the B facts that Green saves the child, but they do not explain B facts. There is good reason then to think that Frankfurt-style cases cannot succeed as counterexamples to connection. I'd have to go over this sort of carefully, which I can't do right now, but I mean, I'm going to assume that the authors are correct in this their analysis. We had one further observation. The puppet puzzle exposes a unique and unhappy mixture of morality and composition. Other philosophers have argued that important aspects of agency are incompatible with materialism, but unlike the puppet puzzle, those arguments are entangled in complex controversies about agency and free will. 3 examples will suffice. First, Cover and Hawthorne investigate whether a particular agent-causal theory is compatible with materialism. Their inquiry is valuable, yet their argument is dialectically limited because it cannot appeal to those who aren't already attracted to or inclined to accept agent-causal theories. Second, the argument on offer in Cover and Hawthorne, Merrick's and Turner all deploy controversial transfer principles that are subject to Frankfurt-style counterexamples. Ours is not so vulnerable. Third, Merrick's and Turner independently argue that free will is incompatible with certain brands of materialism. They too raise valuable considerations, but without further controversial assumptions about the relationship between free will and moral responsibility, their results do not say whether moral responsibility is compatible with materialism. Our question about composition more generally is of deep and independent interest, we think, even if it turns out that, say, moral responsibility does not require freedom. All of these authors furthermore target materialist assumptions. Our puppet puzzle, by contrast, targets the slightly more general thesis of compositism, though that thesis is a consequence of many materialist views. Yeah, see, this is the thing. They've got a slightly more general thing, and so they've loosened up or generalized the materialist views in some sense, and then they're attacking this to get a much more general result, because they're saying, well, look, all these other views have to assume this compositism, and that's what they're attacking. So this is a nice move on their part to find a way to generalize the bunch of other views that, and then get a result off that. Okay, we conclude then the puppet puzzle has a distinctive position in the contemporary literature and invites a wide interest. Can compatibilism help? Yeah, this is where I thought they were going. They're not compatibilists. Maybe they are, we'll find out. The puppet puzzle is reminiscent of arguments for the incompatibility of determinism and either free will or moral responsibility, but especially the latter. One might wonder accordingly whether the dialectical resources used to defend compatibilism about moral responsibility and determinism might enable an effective reply to the puppet puzzle. We suspect not. Instead, we are inclined to think that, while some issues are structurally similar, the issues at play in the puppet puzzle are orthogonal to issues at play in disputes over compatibilism about moral responsibility and determinism. 2 points are in order. First, compatibilism entails that moral responsibility is possible. Compatibilists think that it's possible for someone to be determined and responsible, and from that it follows that it's possible for someone to be morally responsible. According to compatibilists, the conditions of responsibility can be met, and they can even be met if determinism is true. So moral responsibility is an attainable feat. It is tempting to conclude that from reflections along these lines that compatibilists have special reason to automatically resist these epistemic condition. This respect theses like epistemic condition. There is reason to resist this temptation, however, for although compatibilists think moral responsibility is possible, they needn't think that it comes easily or that it obtains in just any case, or even that it obtains in ordinary actual cases. Compatibilists and incompatibilists alike agree that subjects in at least some cases of direct manipulation, for example, are not morally responsible. In cases we've made for the constituent of the puppet puzzle, epistemic condition, for example, could furthermore be accepted by compatibilists and incompatibilists alike. Yeah, see, this is their rhetorical strategy, is they generalize so you don't have to fall down on one of these other older arguments. Second, as argued above, standard replies to transfer principles simply do not apply to connection. One standard compatibilist reply to arguments for incompatibilism then does not solve the puppet puzzle. 2 other standard compatibilist theories, multiple past compatibilism and local miracle compatibilism, target premises in incompatibilist arguments according to which the past laws are fixed. But the puppet puzzle deploys no such premises, and so it is immune to those theories too. I wonder if some of these other arguments could be localized. Like I was saying, they sort of had a localized determinism to different sorts of stuff. I wonder if some of these arguments could be localized to their account. I'll grant, at least right now, because I can't go through this, I can't go look at the other arguments and see how to do it right now. It's just, and I'm not an expert on this stuff in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just wondering if the compatibilist or incompatibilist camps could say, come back and be like, yeah, but we can localize our arguments to what these authors are saying right here. But as of right now, the authors, I think, are correct in their argumentation. That's not to say I agree with them. I'm just saying I don't think they made any bad blunders. The prospects of top-down determination. The puppet puzzle is indeed a puzzle. Well, it says so right here. Puzzle. Here's one way to think about its challenge. The conjunction of several independently motivated theses implies something deeply counterintuitive. Okay. Here's something that I always mess up on, and I'm going to call them out for it because it's completely terrible and horrible. They used 2 colons in the same sentence. How dare you? How dare you? Alright, no, it's completely irrelevant. It's because this happens when you're you change your sentences 14,000 times, and then you don't realize you've got 2 colons in the same sentence. It's okay. Something deeply counterintuitive, that we are not responsible for any of our behavior. We can put our result another way. If we are responsible, another colon. If we are responsible for some of our behavior, as the vast majority of people imagine, then one or more of the independently motivated theses is false. Those unwilling or unable to go without belief in moral responsibility are thus committed to rejecting one or more of these theses. We suspect that most promising and responsible involve rejecting atomic priority, a strategy we'll assess in this section. Atomic priority, this was their strategy to get away from the general determinism and localize it, this atomic priority. Atomic priority, recall, says this: if compositism about human persons is true, then there are atoms whose behavior necessitates and explains my behavior. Atomic priority is a conditional. It is false if and only if its antecedent is true and its consequent is false. Its consequent is false only if this more general principle is also false. Bottom up. For any composite x, there are some y's such that x completely overlaps the y's, and behavior of the y's necessitates and explains the behavior of the x's. So this is the sort of supervenience claim. BU, bottom up, says that the necessitation and explanation proceeds from the bottom up. We could deny that, and then we'd be free to deny that our actions are necessitated and explained by behavior of various atoms. There are 2 variations to consider. Weak independence. Sometimes what we do is independent of, not necessitated and explained by the atoms, the behavior of any atoms. Strong independence. Sometimes what we do is independent of, not necessitated and explained by any atom's behavior, and indeed what we do in fact necessitates and explains what the relevant atoms do. So this is the there's a few different ways to say this stuff. So this one's just saying there's no it's what we do is independent of behavior of any atom. So it's just denying that the atoms make any difference. And what we do, in fact, necessitates and explains what the relevant atoms do. This is going downward causation. So what we do determines what the atoms do. So in some sense, the macroscopic is more important than the microscopic. So this is denying the smallness thesis I was talking about above. It says the big things actually matter more than the small things. And the big things determine what the small things do. It gets very hard to argue for, actually. Doable, but hard. Both variations are interesting. Let's focus on what they have in common. They both deny atomic priority by denying the bottom-up thesis. First, there are some puzzling consequences of denying BU, however. We just briefly draw attention to 3. First, if BU is false, then many philosophers are wrong in their basic picture of the material world. If a picture according to which explanation proceeds from the bottom up. Well, of course, there are people that think this. That's not surprising. And it's not just that some philosophers turn out to be wrong. More importantly, a very natural view turns out to be false. For it is quite natural to think that features of composite wholes they finally said what I was... Supervenience comes back to bite you in the butt. Features of composite wholes supervene and depend on the properties of various smaller items, among which are their parts. Yeah, so this is the supervenience crowd, which is a lot of the people nowadays in grounding, and that was eventually where the other paper I read from them, I believe, what was that called? How to build how to build a thought. I think that had to do with what the grounds were for thinking. So again, so that's interesting. So where they went from this, is they then transferred this sort of puppet puzzle to theories of mind. So, okay, so that's a nice evolution on their part. Kudos to them for expanding on their argumentation and making nice papers. Okay. Second, if B was false, then we face new and difficult questions. Let's call these the special independence and top-down questions. The special independence question asks, under what condition does a composite whole have properties not necessitated and explained by those of various atoms? Similarly, the special top-down question asks, under what conditions do things join together to form a complex that enjoys top-down determination? Okay, so this is what I was saying. What did I call it? Downward causation. And they're calling it top-down determination. Okay. Yeah, because if you have a theory of mind and says, well, the mind determines what you do, then, the mind determines what the atoms are doing also. So, to illustrate, imagine an arbitrary collection of atoms. Their behavior is normally, if not always, explanatory prior to the behavior of whatever arrangements they form. Explanatorily prior, but that doesn't mean causally or determinationally. Okay. Of what arrangements they form. The arrangement does what it does because the atoms do what they do. But if strong or weak independence are possible, then it should in principle be possible for those atoms to form a complex whose whole behavior is independent or even prior to the behavior of those very atoms or any others. In other words, it should be possible to flip the explanatory order from bottom up to top down, or at least to disrupt the expected cross-level explanation. How can that be? More precisely, what conditions could explain the switch from bottom-up explanation to top-down, or the lack of cross-level explanation? The problem here is that the difference between bottom-up and top-down determination seem to be a deep categorical difference, and it's hard to see how a mere change in arrangement or spin or mass or any other physical property could explain a flip from bottom-up to top-down determination. Similarly, the gulf from a whole that enjoys bottom-up explanation to one that does not appear the gulf from a whole that enjoys bottom-up explanation to one that does not appears wide indeed. The special top-down question and the special independence question may seem to be unanswerable even in principle. Okay, I take issue with this entire paragraph because if you're going to take these other questions seriously, you can't appeal to spin or mass or other small properties. These are all small things. So if you're going to do small things, but you're arguing for the priority of small things, you can't appeal to the small things. So I agree with what their general position on this, that it's a very hard question, but I disagree with what they just said right here and how they argued for it. They haven't done anything inherently wrong, but they've just stated the general position. But I don't agree with how they argued for it right here. Because if you're talking about the smallness of things, and the smallness as being more important than the big, and then you say, well, are the big more important than small? You can't just say, well, the smallness is important. That's begging the question. That's what is at issue right here. Just because you can't see how to do it doesn't mean you can appeal to how a mere change in these things. No, this is the smallness. Yeah. Okay. A third consequence of denying the bottom-up thesis that may be unique to strong independence is that it opens up the door to priority monism, the view that the world, something opposed to our everything, is itself the most fundamental thing. Well, there's plenty of monists out there. If priority monism is true, then our behavior is still determined by something distinct from us, namely the behavior of the whole everything. We would then be a puppet of the whole everything, and so wouldn't be responsible for our behavior. Thus, denying bottom-up doesn't immediately get us out of the puppet puzzle. What is needed is top-down determination that stops with us. But why should top-down determination be so courteous? Yes, etiquette is a very hard thing. Yeah, so why should it be so courteous? Yeah, why should it stop there? So this is saying it'd be ad hoc if top-down determination stopped, as opposed from the bottom-up side, if it's coming from without, and then why would the causal or the determination structure, causal structure, stop right when it got to us from the entire universe and got down to us and just stop? That would be an ad hoc argument. Not really courtesy, but their point is well made. It may be helpful to explicitly connect top-down determination with two other suspicious metaphysical phenomena. Suspicious. Non-redundant causal powers. Some wholes have causal powers not had by their parts, whether individually or in concert. Top-down causation is what I was saying. Some holes cause this is where it is. I've looked at top-down causation before, so it's where I'm coming from. Some holes cause changes in their parts, and those changes do not simply mount to some parts, causing changes in other parts. These are of a kind. Oh, old sense of the word kind there. Very nice. The king is kind, as from Shakespeare. It's like, so it's of a type. So the king is of a type. These are of a kind. First, they tend to elicit astonishment, suspicion, or puzzlement. Many doubt their very possibility or coherence, and even believers find them difficult to swallow. Helen Stewart, for example, wonders how any animal could possibly bring about a movement or change in a part of its body in such a way that its causing that movement or change did not simply amount to merely another part of its body causing that movement or change, and therefore being governed by merely the laws and principles pertaining to the behavior of those parts. Second, and perhaps more importantly, they each suggest instances of or special cases of the denial of the bottom-up thesis. The suspicious phenomena entail that some composite whole has a feature not determined by the behavior of various atoms. They thus have a common price, the cost incurred by denying bottom-up. The difficulties we raise for denying bottom-up are of interest, then not only for those looking for a way out of the puppet puzzle, but also to the proponents of redundant causal powers or top-down causation. Seeing the connection between BU and these other suspicious metaphysical phenomena is helpful for two reasons. First, the threefold cost we identified with BU may give us deeper explanation of what is suspicious, is about the suspicious phenomena that is suspicious. No, you're already suspicious. The phenomenon is hard for many philosophers to accept because BU is hard to deny. We think the worries about denying BU, the bottom-up thesis that we've made explicit, may well be lurking implicitly and in the background when, for example, philosophers find top-down causation so distasteful. Second, and according to one good way to make progress in understanding the suspicious phenomena would be to investigate the special independence and special top-down questions. Thinking clearly about these questions may aid us not only in evaluating the puppet puzzle, but also in evaluating the cogency and possibility of this suspicious phenomenon. You know, the authors are right here, but I mean, like I said, I've looked at top-down causation, and there's a parallel argument to most of what they're saying in that literature, so it's not that the people haven't looked at it, it's like, now, is there something special about their argument that might actually help? Maybe, I don't know. But it's not like the philosophers were snoozing on this. So far, the metaphysics. There are metaphysical upshots too. For if the claims of this article are correct, matter of real human importance, including our status as morally responsible agents, closely track the questions about the metaphysics of material objects, including the direction of priority, if any, between parts and wholes. This suggests an important corrective against those who doubt the value or importance of the latter, but not the former. Metaphysics is an abstruse and strange pastime indeed, hello, but it matters. I'll sit around reading metaphysics. In sum, we have seen that bottom-up determination poses a special problem for composite views about human persons. We do not claim that the problem is unsolvable or that we must therefore abandon compositism. The problem is interesting because it challenges our understanding of the relationship between people and the smallest elements of the material world. Our own sense is that the most promising solution will include the proposal that top-down explanations are possible. But this proposal leads to puzzles of its own, we've argued. We conclude then that those of us who wish to uphold the orthodox doctrine that we are composite and morally responsible beings have new work to do. The way forward is by no means obvious or without cost. The puppet puzzle is indeed puzzling. Okay, another very nice article from these authors. So is there anything else I have to say about this? I mean, I think I said it just a few seconds ago when I was saying this. Yeah, we have to see what exactly the difference is between the arguments when they are applied to their compositism here and the atomic priority, as opposed to the extant discussions in other, in say, like philosophy of physics or philosophy of biology, philosophy of mind, where they have discussed top-down theories quite a bit because people want to have like mental causation where the mind causes the body to do something, but that looks like something, the brain is a big thing and it's causing microphysical actions to happen. So you've got like neurons firing, and so it looks like top-down, like And then, of course, you have thoughts and some sort of dualism, so you've got something even more complex or more abstract causing biological things to happen. And so how does that exactly occur, that there's some big thing causing some very little thing to happen? So again, the big small problem. Now, do I understand the significance of atomic priority and compositism that they are talking? Not really. I think what they've done is good, because it sort of gave a nice perspective on a bunch of different topics in this area, and so they were able to like cast a wide net and catch a lot of this stuff with their argument that the top down and the bottom up stuff needs to be more discussed in the the responsibility literature. Yeah, see, Stewart. Oh, I'm gonna like have this here. So top down causation and weak emergence as well. So this is the emergence literature is where a lot of this stuff gets discussed. I think this is Helen Beebe is a philosopher of biology. So this is where again, in the biological case of the makes a big difference. Yeah, like how does evolution make particular changes in organisms and things like that? So all these things they've been discussed in different areas. So for that reason, that if this paper is able to sort of give a general structure to that argument, then it's good. But I mean, I just don't have the. I'd have to go back and see what actually is super helpful about this. I mean, I'll have to take their word for it that it is useful, but I just I can't put my finger on it at the moment. Anywho, so that's it for now. I'll be back, I guess, tonight, and hope everyone's happy. I hope the let's see who this was again. Tanner. Oh no, what happened there? Tanner on Philosophy Roulette 23 is happy. I'll link over there to that. But otherwise, if there's no questions from the viewers, I see there's viewers. But otherwise, have a good day and stay safe out there. Bye bye.